We are going to create a Spring Boot project, and within that we are going to call OpenAI's ChatGPT API for the interaction. So if you look at the user interface of ChatGPT over here, so here basically we enter the prompt and we submit the prompt, then this will internally call the ChatGPT API. So the ChatGPT API basically processes the request and it sends a response back to the client. So if you look at the Postman client over here, we will create a Spring Boot project with this REST API, and this REST API internally call ChatGPT API. And here we submit the prompt, and this REST API will internally call the ChatGPT API, and it will get the response from the ChatGPT API, and it will provide a response over here like this. Alright, so let us go ahead and implement this step by step. The first step is create a Spring Boot project using Spring Initializer and import that project in IntelliJ IDEA. So let us go to the browser, go to the new tab and just type start.spring.io. This will brings up Initializer. And here just choose project type Maven, programming language Java, and here Spring Boot version 3.4.2 as of now. And let us fill up the project metadata over here. Here let us give group as com.springboot. Let us give artifact as Spring Boot ChatGPT. Name is same as artifact. Description demo project for Spring Boot and ChatGPT. Next, package name com.springboot.chatgpt. Packaging as a jar, Java version 23, which is the latest version of as of now. Next, go to the dependency section, click on add dependencies, and here just add Spring Web dependency. Well, we are going to create a simple REST API. For that, we are going to use Spring Web dependency, and this Spring Web dependency internally provides embedded Tomcat server to quickly run the Spring Boot project. Okay, so just choose Spring Web dependency. So as of now, this dependency is enough. Next, go ahead and click on generate button to generate this project as a zip file. And notice here the zip file is successfully downloaded. Open this zip file in a folder and just extract this zip file. Right click, extract all, extract this in a downloads folder. So just click on extract button. Now Spring Boot ChatGPT zip file is extracted. Next, let us open the IntelliJ IDEA and import this project. So here I am going to open the IntelliJ IDEA. So in order to import the existing project, click on open button over here and go to the location where your Spring Boot project is present. In my case, it is in a downloads folder. So in the downloads folder, here we have Spring Boot ChatGPT. So just select this folder, click on OK, click on trust project. Now we have imported Spring Boot ChatGPT project. If you go to pom.xml, here we have Spring Boot starter web dependency for building the REST APIs. Okay, perfect. Next step is we need to get OpenAI key in order to access the ChatGPT API. So let us head over to the OpenAI platform and let us get the ChatGPT AI URL, model as well as the OpenAI key. Okay, so let us go to browser over here and in a new tab just type OpenAI API documentation. Hit enter and go ahead and click on this first link over here. It will head over to the platform.openai.com website. Well, in order to get the OpenAI key, you have to log into the OpenAI platform over here. Well, if you have already created a ChatGPT account, then you can go ahead and use the same credentials to log into this OpenAI platform. So here I am going to log in. If you haven't created an account, just create the account before login and use the sign up credentials to log into the OpenAI platform. So here just type your email address and then type the password and click on continue button over here. So once you logged into the OpenAI platform, click on this API reference and just scroll down, go to the endpoint section, and here you can see the chat endpoint. So this is the chat endpoint that we are going to consume in our Spring Boot application. So in order to have a chat interaction, OpenAI exposes this REST API. Okay, so basically we are going to call this REST API and if you can see the sample request and response details over here. And if you look at the example request over here, so this is the request made by the curl, this is the endpoint URL, content type JSON, authorization OpenAI API key. So in order to call this API, we have to pass the OpenAI key in the header, and this is the JSON object that passed in the request body. So these are the details we want in order to access this ChatGPT API. Next, if you look at the response over here, this is the JSON object. Within that, a choices array. Within that, a message. Message has role and content. So basically, from this response, we need this content section. Okay. So we'll see how we can get the response from the ChatGPT API, how to process the response, and how to get this content in upcoming steps. Okay. Now we pretty much understood, like, this is the chat endpoint that we are going to call in our Spring Boot application, and we need an OpenAI key in order to access this endpoint. Okay. Next, let us go ahead and get this OpenAI key from this OpenAI platform. So go to the search over here, and here just search for API keys and go ahead and click on this API keys over here. It will head over to the Open API keys section, and here, in order to create a new secret key, go ahead and click on this button, and here you can give any name that you want. For example, you can give name like secret or your name, whatever you want, and here project, select default. So basically we can create a project specific OpenAI key over here. If you don't create a project, you can select default one. So for this demonstration, I am going to use the default project over here. Next, you can apply the permissions as well, like all, restricted, read only. So let us select all, and next click on create secret key over here, and look at here the warning. Please save your secret key in a safe place, since you won't be able to view it again. Keep it secure, as anyone with your API key can make requests on your behalf. If you do lose it, you will need to generate a new one. Okay, so just copy the secret key and click on done button. So make sure that you keep this secret key in a safe place, and then click on done button over here, and whatever the secret key you create, that will be listed over here. Okay, now you may have a question like, the secret key is free or paid? Well, whenever you create a new account for OpenAI platform or a ChatGPT, you will get a credit limit, that is $5. For example, if you go to the usage page and go to the cost section over here, and here you can see the $5 limit. So whenever you create a new account, you will get $5 credit limit. So up to $5 credit limit, you can consume the ChatGPT APIs. So after that, you have to pay as you go. If you want to increase the limit, you can click on this increase limit and add the payment method. And if you want to see all the activities, like how many requests you made and response and the tokens, all those stuff, you can go to the activities over here, and here you can see all the requests made, all the response tokens, all those stuff. Next, let us quickly see the pricing for the ChatGPT APIs. So here, go to the docs and just scroll down, and you can go to the pricing over here. Here in a pricing section, you can see these are the models with respect to their prices, and based on your requirement, you can go ahead and use the model, and you can pay as you use. Alright, now we know that which ChatGPT endpoint that we have to consume, and OpenAI key, and as well as model. Okay, so model, basically we are going to use GPT-4o mini. Next, let us configure all these details in our Spring Boot project. So go to our project, and here just type open api.key, and then just paste the key. So whatever the key you have copied, just paste it over here. Next, let us configure the model. So go to the documentation again and go to the API reference over here, and next go to the chat endpoint. So in the endpoint section, we have chat endpoint. So go to chat endpoint over here, and here let us use GPT-4 mini model. Just copy it and go back to application.properties file, and here just type open api.key, model and then paste this model. Similarly, let us configure the endpoint URL. So go back to the documentation, copy this endpoint URL and go to the application.properties file, and here just type OpenAPI.API.URL. So you can give any property key name here. So I'm going to follow this and paste the URL. Now we have configured OpenAI endpoint URL, model and key. Next, in order to confirm whether the OpenAI key will work for this endpoint or not, what we'll do, we will test this endpoint using Postman client. Okay, so let us open the Postman client over here, and here let us make a request. So just create a new request, and here let us choose HTTP post method and go to application.properties file, just copy this endpoint URL and paste it over here, and here go to the body and go to the raw, choose content type JSON over here. So here we need to pass the JSON, so we can get the JSON from the documentation. So go to the documentation over here, and here you can see the curl request. So here just copy this JSON object and go to the Postman client and just paste in the body, and here you can see the model GPT-4o.mini and then messages. So messages basically is an array. So let us pass a single message for this endpoint, and here let us give role user, and here let us ask question like what is Spring Boot. Alright, next, in order to access this chat endpoint, we have to pass the OpenAI key in the header, right? So go to the authorization over here, and here let us choose the type bearer token, and here if you have any existing token, just remove it and go to the application.properties file and just copy this key and go to the Postman client again and just paste here in a token input field. Next, go ahead and click on send button over here. Next, wait a minute, it will take some time, and notice here in the response you can see model choices, within the choices a message, and then content. You can see the content over here. It means the OpenAI key that we have generated using OpenAI platform is working as expected. Now we are good to use this OpenAI key in our Spring Boot project to call this chat endpoint. Okay, perfect. Next step is create OpenAPI API configuration. Well, in order to invoke ChatGPT API in our Spring Boot application, we have to configure the REST client. So in this step, we are going to configure the REST client to make a REST API call to the ChatGPT API. Well, in order to invoke the ChatGPT API in our Spring Boot application, we are going to use REST client. So this REST client is newly introduced in Spring Framework, which is a replacement for REST template. So REST template is deprecated in newer version of Spring Framework, and Spring team suggested to use REST client to make the REST APIs call. And this REST client basically make synchronous API call. Okay, and there is also a web client that we can use for both synchronous and asynchronous. But in our example, we have to make the synchronous call. That's why we are going to use REST client. So let us go ahead and create an OpenAPI configuration where we configure this REST client to make a ChatGPT API call. So let us go to our project over here and go to base package. Let's create a new package and let us give a name as config. Within a config package, let us create a new class. Right click, new, and then Java class. Let us give a class name as OpenAPI configuration. So we are going to call OpenAPI ChatGPT API, right? So that's why this is the name. Next, let us make this class as a Java configuration class by annotating it with add configuration annotation from org Spring Framework context annotation package. So we use add configuration annotation to make a class as a Java configuration, and within the Java configuration class we define the Spring Beans by using add bin annotation. Next, within this class, let us configure REST client to interact with OpenAPI's ChatGPT API. So in order to configure the REST client, we need the API URL. So if you go to application.properties file, here we have a URL, right? So let us get this URL from this properties file using @value annotation. So go back to configuration class, and here let us define the instance variable private string API URL. Next, let us use @value annotation to get the value for a particular property. So just use @value annotation over here, and here within a double quote dollar, and then within a curly braces just pass the property key. So go to the application.properties file and just copy this property key over here and just pass to this @value annotation. So here we are using @value annotation to get the value for this property from the application.properties file. Next, we are good to configure the REST client. So here let us create a method public REST client. So basically we are going to configure the Spring Bean by using @bean annotation. That's why first we need to create a method, and we need to annotate that method with @bean annotation. So here let us give method name as REST client, and then here let us have a return statement, and let us create an instance of REST client. So REST client, it has a builder method. We use builder method to build this REST client object, and here let us call base URL and then pass this API URL. Okay, next let us build the object by using build method. Now we have created a REST client method that returns the REST client object. Next, let us make this REST client object as a Spring Bean by annotating this method with @bean annotation. So we use @bean annotation to make this REST client object as a Spring Bean and store that Spring Bean in a Spring IOC container. Next step is create DTOs for API requests and responses. Well, we use DTO, that is data transfer object pattern, to transfer the data between client and server. And DTO basically holds the immutable data. Alright. And Java basically has a Java record classes, so which we can use to store the immutable data. Well, Java record class was introduced in Java 14, and it is a special kind of class that holds immutable data. And Java record class significantly reduces the boilerplate code like constructors, getter methods equals hash code, and toString method. So if we create a Java record class, we don't have to create a constructor, getter methods equals hash code, and toString methods, because Java compiler will automatically provide all these methods. Okay, but if we use a regular Java class, then we have to create all these methods like getter methods, constructor, toString equals hash code. Okay, so Java record is a special kind of class that holds immutable data, and compiler will automatically create constructor, getter methods equals hash code, and toString methods for this Java record. And Java record is a good candidate to create the DTO classes. Okay, so let us go ahead and let us use Java record to create a DTOs. So let us first create a DTO class for ChatGPT request. So here go to base package and create a new package. Let us call it as DTO, and within a DTO package let's create a new class, and here select record, and let us give class name as ChatGPT request, or you can give like DTO. Okay, but here let us give request. So this is the record. Next, let us pass the fields string model and then list message, and here let us give name messages. So here we are using model and messages fields because ChatGPT API expect these two mandatory fields in the request body, right? For example, if you go to the Postman client and while calling this ChatGPT API, we have passed this request, right, as a JSON, and you can see model and messages. So this is what we are using over here, model and messages, and this message is basically list or array. If you look at here, message is basically an array. Okay, so array and list both uses the same syntax. Next, temperature is not a mandatory field, so we can ignore it, but model and messages are mandatory. That's why let us create model and messages fields over here. And look at here message. So message is again an object that contains two fields, role and content. If you go to the Postman client, here you can see each message has a two fields. One is a role and another is a content, right? So let us create a message record over here. So within this record, let us create a inner class, that is record, public, and then type static record. So record is nothing but a special type of class that holds immutable data, and it automatically generates a constructor, getter methods, equals to string and hash code. Okay, and here we are creating a inner static record class. Next, let us give record class name as message, and then pass two fields, that is role and content. String role, string content. So make sure that the field names are same. If you go to the Postman client, here field name is role and here field name is content. So the field name should match these two attributes in the JSON. Okay, next here import the list. Now we have created a DTO for ChatGPT API request. Similarly, let us create one more DTO for ChatGPT API response as well. So go to DTO package, right click on it, new, and then choose Java class and select record over here, and let us give record name as ChatGPT response. So this is the record, and here we need to pass the fields. So if you go to the Postman client and if you look at the response of this REST API call over here, choices basically we need, because choices basically contains the response for the prompt. So you can see the content over here. Okay, so basically we need this content data from this response. That's why we need a choices, and from choices we can get the message, and from message we can get the content. So we need to follow this structure. Okay, so let's go back to our code over here, and here let us first create a list of choices. So here just type choice and let us say choices. And again, if you go to Postman client, so choice basically has a message. Within a message we have a role and content. So here within this record, let's create a choice record. So public static record, and then let us give record name as choice. Choice has a message. Okay, and next within this record, let's create one more record, public. So in Java we can have one class within another inner class and within another inner class, like that. Here we are creating the Java record classes. So here public static record, and then message has a two fields, role, content. Alright, so now we have created a structure for the ChatGPT response. So based on this response we can create DTO class like this, so that whenever we make a ChatGPT API call, then this class will hold the response of the ChatGPT API. Okay, now we have created a DTO class to hold the ChatGPT API response. Next, let us create one more DTO class to transfer the data between client and server. So here right click, new, and then Java class. Let us select record, and here let us give the record name as prompt request, and here just pass the field prompt. So this is the DTO class that we are going to use to transfer the data between the Postman client and our REST API. Okay, perfect. Now in this step we have created these three DTO classes. Alright, perfect. Next step is implement ChatGPT service. So let us create a ChatGPT service in which we will make a ChatGPT API call. So here go to our project and let us create a new package for that. Right click, new, and then choose package. Let us give package name as service. Within a service package, let us create a new class and let us give class name as ChatGPT service. Next, let us make this service class as a Spring Bean by annotating it with add service annotation. Next, within this service class, let us have a REST client. So we have already configured the REST client in our OpenAPI configuration. So let us inject this REST client in a ChatGPT service class. So for that, first create a field private final REST client. Next, let us use constructor based dependency injection to inject this REST client. For that, let us create a constructor public ChatGPT service and then pass REST client as a parameter to the constructor, and within the constructor this dot REST client equal to REST client. Perfect. So here we have made this REST client as a final by using final keyword, because we are going to create this REST client only once. We are not allowing to modify this REST client. Okay. So here we can also use @atword annotation to inject this REST client dependency. But if the class has a single constructor, then we can ignore using this @atword annotation, because Spring Container will automatically inject the dependency by using this constructor. If the class has a multiple constructors, then we have to annotate one of the constructor with @atword annotation, because Spring IOC container will get confused like which constructor it have to inject, right? So if class has a multiple constructors, then we have to annotate one of the constructor with @atword annotation. But here this class has a single constructor, so we can omit using @atword annotation, because Spring IOC container will automatically inject the dependency by using this constructor. Next, we need to fetch the OpenAPI key and OpenAPI model from the application.properties file. For that, we can use @value annotation. So in order to use @value annotation, we have to create the fields first. So here just type private and then string and then API key. Next, create one more field private string model. Next, let us bind the API key to this field by using @value annotation. So here just use @value annotation, and this is the syntax. Within double quote dollar, within curly braces, just pass the property key. So if you go to application.properties file, and here we have this property key, just copy this and go to the ChatGPT service, and within a curly braces just paste it. So similarly, just copy this @value annotation and annotate it with model field, and go back to application.properties file, copy this property key to fetch the model, and go to ChatGPT service, and here just paste it. Okay, so by using @value annotation, we are going to fetch the property value by using property key over here. Next, let us create a method in which we are going to call the ChatGPT API. So here just type public, let us give return type as a string, and let us give method name as get chat response, and let us pass prompt request as a parameter to this method. Next, within this method, let us create an object of ChatGPT request DTO class. Well, once we make the ChatGPT API call, then we have to pass a JSON in the request body. So for that, let us create an object of ChatGPT request. ChatGPT request equal to new ChatGPT request. Next, let us pass values to the constructor. First value is model, second value is messages. If you go to the Postman client, and here you can see model and then messages. Messages is basically list. So here go to project, and here just type list, and then call op method new ChatGPT request dot message, and message takes two values. First is a role, so let us pass user as a role, and second is content, that is prompt. So we can get the prompt from this prompt request. So here just copy paste this prompt request object. It has prompt method, so this prompt method returns a prompt. That's it. Now we have created ChatGPT request object that contains a model and list of messages. Next, let us write the logic to make the ChatGPT API call. In order to call the ChatGPT API, we are going to use the REST client, right? So here just call REST client. It has a post method to make HTTP post request. So if you go to Postman client, so here we are calling this a ChatGPT API by using HTTP post method, right? And in a code, this is the post method. It will make HTTP post request. Next, this post method returns request body URL spec. So let us change the method calls over here. So here just call the header and let us pass the key value pairs. So basically, in order to make the ChatGPT API call, we have to pass the API key. For that, this is the key value pair. So just type key as a authorization and then value as a bearer API key. So here just type the string bearer and followed by the API key, and make sure that there is a space between API key and bearer string. Next, let us create one more header, because we are going to pass ChatGPT request object as a JSON. So for that, just have a header over here and then specify the content type JSON. So content type as a key and value as a application/JSON. Perfect. Next, we need to pass this ChatGPT request object in the request body. For that, let us call a body method and then pass ChatGPT request object, and then call retrieve method to make the call, and then finally call body method to hold the ChatGPT API response. And we are going to hold the ChatGPT API response in a ChatGPT response DTO class, right? So here just pass ChatGPT response.class. Next, here let us hold the ChatGPT response object into a local variable of type ChatGPT response. Let us give variable name as response. Okay, perfect. So now this ChatGPT response has this data like choices within choices, a message within a message, role and content. But we want only this content, right? So let us go ahead and only get the content from this ChatGPT response object. So here let us have a return statement, and then let us get the content from this response object. So here response, it has choices. Choices is basically a list. We can call the get method to get the first response by using 0th index, and then it has a message. Message has a role and content. We want only the content. For that, just call content. That's it. Now this get chat response basically returns the content for this particular prompt. Okay. Next step is create a ChatGPT controller that will internally call this ChatGPT service. So in order to create a ChatGPT controller, let's create a new package. So right click on a base package, new, and then choose package. Let us give package name as controller. Within a controller package, let's create a new class, and let us give class name as ChatGPT controller. Next, let us make this class as a Spring REST controller by annotating this class with @REST controller annotation. Next, let us annotate this class with one more annotation, that is @request mapping annotation, to configure the REST API URL. So this is basically a REST API base URL, that is /API/chat. Okay. Next, within this Spring REST controller class, let us create the REST endpoints. So before that, we need to inject the ChatGPT service. So for that, just create a field private final ChatGPT service. Well, we are going to use constructor based dependency injection to inject this ChatGPT service. So for that, just create a constructor public ChatGPT controller and then pass ChatGPT service to this constructor, and within this constructor, this dot ChatGPT service equal to ChatGPT service. Now we have injected ChatGPT service dependency in a ChatGPT controller by using this constructor. Next, we are good to create the REST API that will internally call this ChatGPT service. So here just type public, and let us give return type of the method as a string. Let us give method name as a chat, and let us pass parameter, that is prompt request. and then prompt request. Okay, next here let us have a return statement and just call ChatGPT service. It has get chat response and then pass prompt request. Now we have created a chat method that returns a chat response. Next, let us make this method as a REST API by annotating this method with @post mapping annotation. And again here we need to bind the request JSON to this Java object, right? So for that, let us use @request body annotation. Alright, now we have built a simple chat REST API that takes a prompt as a parameter and it internally calls ChatGPT service to make the ChatGPT API call and get the response and return that response to the client. Next step is run the Spring Boot application and test this chat REST API by using Postman client. So go to the main entry point class over here. From here, let us run the Spring Boot application. Well, notice here our Spring Boot application is up and running in embedded Tomcat server on port 8080. Next, let us head over to the Postman client. And here let us create a new request and let us choose HTTP post method over here and let us enter the URL HTTP localhost 8080/API/chat. Well, if you go to the project, go to ChatGPT controller and here we have configured the REST API URL /API/chat. So this is the URL we are using in the request. Okay, next go to the body and within a body we need to pass the prompt in a JSON format. So just choose raw here, content type JSON, and here just create the JSON. Let us give JSON attribute as prompt and then let us give value. Let us say what is Spring Boot. So basically here we are telling ChatGPT like what is Spring Boot. Next, if you go to the project and go to prompt request class, it has a field prompt. So this prompt field name and this JSON attribute name both should be same, because in a REST API we are using this prompt request DTO class to to bind this JSON into Java object, right? That's why the field and JSON attributes should be same. Next, let us hit the send button to send this request. So it will take some time, just wait a second. And there we go. You can see the response of the REST API over here. You can see the ChatGPT response. Spring Boot is a open source Java-based framework that is part of Spring ecosystem. It means we have successfully integrated ChatGPT API in our Spring Boot application and we have tested the integration with this Chat REST API. Okay. Next, let us send one more request to the ChatGPT like what is Java, explain in 2 to 3 lines, and just send the request and let us wait for the response. And here you can see Java is a high level object oriented programming language designed for portability, performance and security. Okay, so this is how we can call the chat REST API. It will internally call ChatGPT API and get the response and send that response back to the client like this. It means we have successfully integrated ChatGPT API in our Spring Boot application and we have tested that integration using this REST API. Alright, great. I will see you in the next lecture.